This week on the Deep Leadership Podcast.
But anything that's below 3-to-1 ratio of positive to negative interaction is considered a toxic work environment.
This episode is brought to you by the Salty Sailor Coffee Company, the official coffee of the Deep Leadership Podcast. Salty Sailor is a veteran-owned coffee brand on a mission to deliver premium, fresh roasted coffee while making a positive impact in the world. Their motto is drink coffee and do good, which reflects their commitment to making amazing coffee and actively supporting the military community. 10% of every order goes to the Navy Marine Corps Relief Society, an organization dedicated to helping sailors, Marines, and their families in times of need. All our listeners get 10% off every order of their amazing coffee by using the discount code DEEP at checkout. So check them out at saltysailorcoffee.com. Welcome to the Deep Leadership Podcast. Today I'm joined by Lindsay Tsang. Lindsay is the founder of Happy Hires, a company focused on transforming toxic work environments into places where people are energized and inspired by exceptional leadership. With a background as a trained therapist, Lindsay partners with CEOs and owner-operators of small to medium-sized enterprises to excel in leadership. He offers strategic planning, executive coaching, job benchmarking, and dynamic team workshops. Lindsay has a PhD in organizational psychology, specializing in leadership and positive psychology. He is also a certified executive coach through the Center for Executive Coaching. I'm excited to have him on the show to learn from his expertise. So, Lindsay, welcome to the show.
Hey, thanks for having me on the show.
It is so good to meet you. So good to meet another Liberty alum. We were just talking before we pressed record. You got your PhD from Liberty University, and I'm well on my way. So I've got about another year's worth of work. So congratulations on getting yours, and I'm looking forward to finishing up mine this year. So
Yeah, good luck with it. It's good. It's a good time.
I don't know about a good time, but it is a time, that's for sure. But you've proved that it can be done, so I'm excited about it. So let's dive in. The name of your company is Happy Hires. Love the name of it. What inspired you to start this company, but also getting into the leadership space? How did you end up in this strange world of leadership?
Yeah, well, I'm one of those guys who, whether I looked for it or not, leadership kind of came to me. So I was put into positions where I had to lead and I had to learn quickly how to lead. And I was so thankful for all the great resources out there on leadership, great books. So it's always been a passion of mine because of the learning and the practice of it. Um, when I was, as a practicing therapist, I do get a lot of clients who happen to be business owners and leaders. Um, or I have people who are coming in because they're stressed and burnt out because of their bad, toxic workplaces. So leadership matters so much for people. It's just a huge ripple effect on a person's life, and also when they're affected, their families are affected as well. And so that's why when I started my practice, I knew right away that I was going to start at the individual level, move to some couples therapy, and then next thing was the organizational level or the leadership level that I wanted to work on.
Yeah, that makes a lot of sense. And the idea of Happy Hires, what's the inspiration behind the name of the company?
Well, I'm a very positive person, I think, so it kind of fits in with my branding of my personality. But happy hires, happy people really is what we're talking about in a company. Is it's kind of like the what you call it, the secret sauce of success when it comes to leading a good team, right?
Yeah, absolutely. It is a secret sauce. I love it. That's what attracted me to you and the work that you do, because and what I found as a leadership practitioner is that, yeah, it work and works hard, but
Yeah,
you can have fun at work, and you can have, the number one thing in our company is respect. So it's very important. It's the number one priority we list on everything, is that we show respect for each other. And I think respect means that we treat each other in a way that each person is important to the role, regardless of what your position in the company. And I think just starting off with that culture of respect, I think it makes it a better place to work. It's more fun to work, and we have a good time. We have a lot of laughs, And I, of course, where I'm talking about it from an entrepreneur's perspective with a smaller company, but I think having happy employees is actually very good for productivity. It's very good for performance. And that's what I've seen in my career.
Hmm.
Yeah. So
Yeah,
I
yeah.
love it.
Well, and very strongly correlated in all sorts of studies, right? So we know it goes both ways. We have high performance, we have happy people. We have happy people, we have high performance. So it's kind of like a virtuous cycle.
Yeah. They're tied together. Yeah.
Yeah.
I always say, I
Hmm.
want you to be happy, but you can be tired. You might be tired at the end of the day, but I want you to be happy.
Yeah.
So sometimes we're tired. So, well,
Hmm.
the problems I've seen in the leadership world is that we have an employee engagement problem, and it's been going
Hmm.
on for a long time, and the data doesn't seem to get much better.
Hmm.
We sort of have been stagnant at about a 30% engagement rate in most companies around the world. So what do you think the big problem is with employee engagement, and what should leaders be thinking about as far as like what they should be doing different to increase that engagement in companies?
Hmm. I think I think one of the things that I'm sticking to is that we need to move away from looking at how do I engage the company as a whole. Um, I mean, I'm sure there are good initiatives for that, right? Like having a gym in the corporation in the building might be nice, or having nice health benefits, and those are all really great things. But it's too much of a blanket, like a band-aid solution. And what we really need to look at is the individual, because everybody is motivated or engaged in a different way. And so when I'm working with my clients, one of the things I would encourage them to do is to create a individualized engagement plan for each person on our team.
Hmm,
Uh, yeah, and so
that's
not
new.
yeah,
Yeah.
and not only would we do that, we would couple that with good assessments, right? So we can see, I love using the DISC profile, and we can see their behavioral style, we can see their motivator style, and that would be a good conversation starter when I get them to sit down with each person on their team and interview and say, how do I best motivate you? How do I best, how do I praise you the best? How do you receive praise? Um, and what kind of development do you need? Right. So those are the kind of questions you can have. Um, and so this is actually a concept I've taken from my training in the Center for Executive Coaching. When they were doing this kind of um, plan, they found that in their study anyway, the subgroups would have 3 times more engagement than the other groups who were not going through this individualized approach. Um, and so when they realized that, they said, okay, this was a pilot, let's do it for another sub team in the corporation, and they saw the same effect. So yeah, it's a pretty cool concept, I think, that makes sense at face value, but it's
Yeah.
just a lot of people don't put the effort into doing it.
I've interviewed more than 350 people on the show, and no one has brought up the idea of an individualized engagement plan. And when I hear it, it's one of those things that just makes so much sense. And one of the things that's you touched on is that, like in most corporations, when they try to do like, oh, we got to improve engagement, so they look at the group of all employees, and just through your practice, and I know because I love people and I love observing people, is that everyone is different and everyone's motivated different. And if you take, you cannot take a one size fits all approach to leadership, and you can't take a one size fits all approach to engagement. And so I don't know why I never thought of that, but it seems like that it makes sense. I would say that I probably do that naturally. Like I'm
Yeah.
naturally curious with each individual. I don't have an engagement plan per se, but like I even on my computer right here, I have a spreadsheet with each of my employees, and I know their wives' names, their kids' names, their dogs' names. I know when their birthday is. I know their hobbies. I know the things they're into. And I mean, that might seem creepy that I keep all this stuff, but for me, it's a way as a reminder, so that when I'm talking with the employee, I remember, things about them, so that I show my interest in them, I'm show curiosity with them, and I'm asking about the things that are going on in their lives. And I think getting to
Hmm.
know an employee, I always say you can't lead people you don't know. And so it's a big part of what I do. But what you're saying is like really like if you're looking for a systematic way of doing it, what you're presenting is actually a much more scientific and in a systematic way of approaching it.
Yeah, so I partner with TTSI International Talent Insights. I don't know if you've heard of them.
I have.
They do assessments and everything. So it was really neat to visit their headquarters because they live, they drink the Kool-Aid, right? They have
Yeah.
you you go in there and everyone on their wall has their disc profile and their top four motivators. And so during our training, they're just telling us, I can, right before I'm about to talk with someone, I can do a quick peek and say, oh, yeah, this person, I need to be brief with them and then go. But also, they're incentivized by status and control. So maybe I need to, I can pitch this idea to them in that way that, hey, this is going to give you, more recognition if you can do this thing. So I just thought it's so cool that they can use a science like that and make that place. The people when you talk with some of the people who work there, they just love working there. They're like, I couldn't wait to be able to work here. And once I got here, it's like they really get me. They really want me to excel in my uniqueness. So yeah, it seems to be working quite well for them. So that's something that I took away when I went to see them.
I love that. It's such a great and
Mhm.
simple concept. And especially because like sometimes I think some leaders who may not be naturally empathetic or and they're trying to say, oh, I'm just not comfortable with getting to know people. Here you go. Here's a process that you can use. And it's just, it's a little more systematic versus, being naturally curious, naturally empathetic kind of person. Here's a system that works. And I love that. So it can fit with any leader as long as you can follow a process. So that makes a lot of sense. One of the things you talk about, which I'm interested in, is the idea of a hero approach to leadership. So can you talk us through what the hero approach is and why it's so effective?
Okay. Well, the hero is an acronym that is actually the four constructs of something called psychological capital. Psychological capital is a resource, an internal resource. So the major theory here we're talking about is called the job demand resource theory model. In that the higher you have in a job demand, the more likely you are to lead to burnout, right? But the more resources you're given, the more of a buffer you've been given between that demand and the burnout. And so there's resources come in all sorts of shapes, right? You have leadership resource. When you have a good leader, that's a good resource. You have social resources, you have financial resources, and one of those things is your personal psychological resource, so your positive psychological states. So that's what the hero stands for. It's just four positive psychological states that are highly correlated with one another, and that when you have as a whole, they are a better or stronger predictor of positive results like high performance or engagement. So the four letters stand for hope, uh, efficacy, which is another fancy word for confidence, resilience, and optimism. And in my study, actually, when I was at Liberty, I was studying doctors and nurses in Canada, and my survey captured three variables. One of them was how they perceive their supervisor, whether they were a good servant leader. Servant leadership is a leadership model where you prioritize the needs of your followers above even of the organization. And the second one was how that affected their psychological capital, and ultimately, how did that lead, how did that affect their turnover intention, whether they want to leave the organization or not. And so the data backs up what makes sense is that when you have a good leader, you have better psychological capital, and
Mm.
therefore you have less likely wanting to leave the company.
This makes a lot of sense. And we talked earlier because I'm going to be studying resilience in startup companies, which is, again, one of these it's like an important, because startups are always faced with all sorts of uncertainty, and especially we faced it during the COVID crisis. So to me, I want to find, where does resilience come from? Where does this, where
Mm,
does it stem from? Is it from the individual? Is it from the leader? Is it in the culture? And so it's interesting. So this is essentially, when you have resiliency, you have psychological capital. In other words, something in excess that will help you get through the tough times, right? It's a
yeah,
resource that you can go to help you get through tough times,
yeah,
right?
yeah. So at a personal level, this is probably what's going on psychologically for you. Someone who is scoring high on resilience are able to recognize the things they can't control and the things they can control, and then they are able to move their attention and also gather their resources around the things that they can control. So it's not too far from the Francis of Assisi prayer in
Yeah. Yeah.
Alcoholics Anonymous, right? Is give me the the wisdom to know the difference. It's the courage to change the things I can,
Yep.
the serenity to let go of the things I cannot.
Yep.
I made it in the wrong order, but
And the wisdom to know the
and
difference,
the
right?
wisdom to
Yeah.
know the difference, right?
Yeah, exactly.
Um,
No, I think it is essential to that, because especially, I was leading a company during COVID, and there was just a lot of things that were completely out of my control.
right.
And it's a terrible feeling as a leader, because we tend to
Mm-hmm.
be, we like things to be, we like to control things, and not we like things to be under our control,
Yeah.
things that we can fix. We like to fix things, and oh, sales are down. Oh, we need to do X, Y, and Z. We're good at that. But when the state tells you you can't operate, and
Mm,
you're like, okay, what does that mean? Like you have no control over that. And so how do you deal with that? And I think you're right. I think the best leaders that have, or the leaders that have resilience, are like, okay, I can't change that. That's what it is. What
mm,
can I change? What can I do differently? How can I still run this business effectively? And I think that's clearly what I experienced during that time.
yeah. Yeah, and the studies do show that, right? If a leader has high resilience, uh, it actually has a correlation with follower resilience as well.
Mm, mm.
So there's that trickle down effect, and you know, the guess is because there's this kind of social learning, right? You're seeing your leader uh, behaving in resilience, and then you also can follow through with that.
Yeah, yeah. I mean, I saw it when I was in the Navy, because I was a submarine officer, and we would get into some really sketchy situations that, we'd be in a terrible storm with high sea states. The ship was rocking all over the place, and as a young officer, like, this doesn't seem right, and then we all look to our captain. Everyone's looking at the captain. Is he panicking? What's he doing, right? and
Mm,
and he's just like he was just sitting in a park on a Sunday afternoon, like, not a big deal. He's just like, this is normal. And you're like, oh, okay, well, it's so yeah, I can see where the if the leader is a certain way, the followers get that sense of calm as well. Like, okay, well, this must be normal, and maybe he was panicking inside, but certainly the exterior was, this is normal, and
yeah.
everything's going to be fine. And I think that led to us believing everything would be fine, which
Mm-hmm.
was a great feeling.
Right. And since we're talking about the whole of the hero, right? So then what that means is that if you have higher of the other three, then you would also probably be correlated with having higher resilience, right?
Hmm.
So yeah, so like if I'm able to, so hope in the psychological definition is that you're able to see the end goal and you're able to see the goal path towards it, or multiple goal paths towards it. And so if you have that, then you would also feel more resilient. Or
Hmm.
efficacy is the belief that what effort I put into something will have a positive result, right? So if I can increase that, then I know that my resilience will go up. Optimism is my ability to see negative events as temporary and localized, as opposed to pervasive and permanent. So if I can minimize those negative events, but then also have a general sense of the positive beliefs as being just true,
Yeah.
then I would feel more optimistic and I'll feel more resilient as well. So those, they're all interrelated with each other.
Yeah, yeah, absolutely. And I think hope and optimism are two that I think the leader has a has a big role in establishing that in the culture.
Hmm.
I think employees sense if we have hope. They sense if we're optimistic. They sense then when we're in despair too. So and they sense when
Yeah. Yes.
we're feel negative. So we have a big impact on the culture or the mood within the organization, I guess more appropriate as a leader. So those are really important. I always say that as a leader, you're on stage 24/7. And so how you act in various situations can affect, the hope and optimism in the organization. So yeah, I
Hmm.
like that. I love that.
And you know what's neat about why I wanted to study psychological capital is that they're not traits. They are states, so they can change. They go up and down.
Hmm.
And um, there's also clear pathways or methods to increasing them. So they're controllable in some to some degree.
Hmm. Yeah.
Or there are tools that are available. And so that's why when if leaders can learn how to do those well or learn the tools behind it, then they can also use the same tools for their teams, right?
Yeah, that makes a lot of sense. So let's talk a little bit about leadership styles. Your research project looked at your dissertation looked into servant leadership. Um, what servant leadership? Are there some other styles that you find work for helping to create an effective culture where employees are happy, they're engaged, they're involved? Are there other leadership styles like servant leadership, or is servant leadership what you feel is the best in that regard?
Oh well, I mean, I am partial to it. I like it better. It fits with my style or personality, and also where I came from. Uh, I served a nonprofit, and that was the model that they adhered to. So that's why I knew about it and practiced it and saw it in action.
Hmm.
Um, but it's really, I mean, there's so many different models out there, and there's
Yeah,
always
yeah,
more new ones coming out, right? The big one, and I don't know how long ago, it's probably 50 years ago. Transformational leadership
yeah.
is the one that is the standard of all, where all the other ones are compared to almost, right?
Mm.
And so there was a study that showed that they're trying to see if other models are just redundant models of the transformation model. So they compared transformational servant leadership. I forgot what the other one was. It might have been ethical or authentic. There's so many different types of
Hmm.
leadership models. So what they found was that, at least in this study, the servant leadership did have a variance to it from transformational, in that it accounted for more of organizational commitment.
Mm.
Um, so it's a pretty weird one, to be honest, because transformational leadership is about transforming your followers, giving them a really big vision, getting them to go above and beyond for their above their beyond their roles, even for their organization, right? Or for the vision, which is a double-edged sword sometimes, because it's great, it engages people, job satisfaction, but it also has, you know, I think when there's a really, really strong organizational identity, for example, um, then you are more prone to feel very disappointed
Mm.
if you feel betrayed somehow by the organization, or if things are not going well in the organization, you really feel it. Servant leadership, but what differentiates it from transformational leadership is that the idea is your supervisor actually cares about you as an individual above that of even the organization,
Yeah.
and so they're caring for your needs. One of the ways that the organization I used to work with did that was they offered to pay for us to get our master's degrees, even though they know that there's a potential for you to have this really highly qualified, you know, credential and then leave the company
Yeah.
and do something elsewhere. But they said, you know what, we want to bless you with that, right? We want you to be able to have that, even if it's not right here.
Yeah, I love that. It's interesting because I've always thought of myself as a servant leader throughout my career. But I think when I explored transformational leadership, I realized that's probably a little more my style, in that I've always believed that, in taking care of people. But it was always that I was always trying to help people kind of become the best versions of themselves in our organization, but also in pursuit of the company's mission. So
Mm-hmm.
in other words, I'm always trying to fit the right puzzle pieces in the organization. So, what does the individual, want out of life, and what really motivates them, and trying to put them in a role where they get a chance to be that best versions of themselves in pursuit of the company mission.
Yeah.
And the other thing is, I was always the guy hired to turn around struggling manufacturing operations. So
Mm-hmm.
I was given the role of transformation. Like, you're being hired to turn this business around. So I was always in those roles. And so that's why when I read about and studied transformational leadership, I said, well, that's kind of a little bit more my style. That's what I'm good at and I enjoy doing. So it's helping people become their best in pursuit of helping the company become their best. So I always say, like, it's the mission and the people. It's a little more of a connection between the two, where servant leadership puts the person above even the mission. And I
Mm-hmm.
think even in the Navy was like that. So it was the mission and the people. But in our case, in the Navy's case, they would default to mission first, right? Get the mission
Yes.
done, and people were a little lower. But I think I probably put people up pretty high. But I do think the two are linked in my mind. Like, I have to figure out how to achieve the mission in the best interest of the people as well. And I think I've
Mm-hmm.
always kept those at a fairly equal level. So I think I probably fit more in the area of transformational leadership.
Yeah, I mean, you can't have one without the other, really.
Yeah, you can't. You can't.
it's
And
not it's
people,
not leadership otherwise.
yeah, and my people would say I'm a servant leader because of the things I do,
Yeah.
but I do probably more try. I'm trying to be a transformation leadership, I think, but I think I
Mhm.
default to servant leadership a lot. So because
Yeah.
I enjoy people, and I enjoy seeing them grow and developing them, and seeing them get excited about different things. And so
Yeah. Yeah.
I enjoy that part of it. So
Right. And those are elements of servant leadership, right?
yeah,
When
yeah,
you develop people, when you're good at conceptualizing, which is like the vision, right? So
yeah.
it is an aspect still. So they are highly correlated.
They
You
really are. Yeah,
Yeah,
they really
yeah,
are. I think there's just slight nuances between
yeah.
the two, but I really feel like transformational leadership is a pretty interesting style too. But I'm a servant leadership guy as well.
Mhm.
But I think it's interesting that you kind of locked into those two as well. So in terms of your work is in positive psychology. We talked about the hero model. Are there other ways that positive psychology helps in terms of leadership? I mean, what are there some elements of positive psychology that the people listening to the show who are leaders can sort of take with them? Are there some ideas from that that study that can help us be better leaders?
Yeah, what I really love to do is something called appreciative inquiry. Have you heard of that before?
No.
And it is based on positive psychology. So positive psychology is actually relatively new, in terms of the scientific world, anyway. In the sense that most of the things we do is study what's going wrong,
Yeah.
right? And so positive psychology was like, what if we start studying what thriving actually looks like, right? And that's where things like hero comes from, right? Um, Appreciative inquiry is a model of questioning that is trying to draw out the positive. Um, and so, in the typical strategic planning is to look at SWOT, right? Strengths,
Yeah.
weaknesses, opportunities, threats, right? So we in appreciative inquiry, we actually it sounds kind of bad, but I can explain it. We actually kind of skim by the weaknesses. Really, we don't really look at that. Instead, we say we use something called the SOAR model. So we say let's look at all the strengths first. Let's look at what is the best of. and you want to get conversation to happen. So you bring in the whole team. You get them to talk about when were you most proud? When did you feel the most alive? When did you talk about those things in the context of the organization, and you draw themes from it, and then we move on to, okay, well, aspirations then is what can be the best? What would be the best going forward? What are aspirational statements that we can agree on? So you work on those, and then you finally move on to, okay, so based on our strengths and aspirations, what are the opportunities that we're looking to approach this, let's say, for strategic planning for this coming year, right? So what are and then what are the results? How do we measure that? What are the plans to get there? Um, so what that does is it brings about a lot of energy to the group. It's appreciating what is already good. It's highlighting it. It's and then it's putting their minds more towards what's possible instead of what's not going well. So that's another very practical way of using positive psychology. In you know, I would apply this on my the weekly meetings,
Yeah, yeah.
right? And I would apply this to like annual strategic planning or quarterly planning. Is using this kind of model. I just went through this model very recently, with a group of friends from church, actually. A small group of guys, and just like, what does this group mean to you, right? So we went through this model, and you can see the excitement and the engagement.
Yeah,
People are
yeah.
buying because now they are part of the conversation, and I'm not coming from a top-down approach telling them this is what we need to do. I'm saying, let's use these questions to uh, elicit this from you.
That makes a lot of sense. I was just reading a study about looking at executive coaching, and they were talking about a solution-based coaching, which is focusing on a positive, moving forward versus problem-based coaching, where you kind of look at the problems, you assess the problems, you look for root cause, you try to correct it. But they found that that the positive focused or solutions based coaching ended up being 70% faster to reach the client's objectives, because you didn't spend a lot of time looking at the problems. You spent more time looking at how do we move forward, and so yeah, maybe there's a little bit of weakness to it because you never really get to the root causes of the problems. But in a lot of cases, once you start introducing discussions on problems, that sometimes you get stuck there and you just never get
Yeah,
beyond
yeah,
to the solution. So I love the idea of the SOAR model, where you're kind of focusing on, like, let's like, what do we need to do to move forward, versus spending a lot of time focused on the
yeah, yeah.
negative side or the problems.
Well, then you're not ignoring weaknesses, I don't think, with this. You're just it's just, because weaknesses can be opportunities, right? So
Right,
that's
right.
it's just you're just shifting the focus on the possibilities rather than what's going wrong in the company or in the team, right?
Yeah, yeah. It's interesting too, because when I have discussions with my teams over the years, when you say what's going wrong here, you get a long laundry list, and when you say what's going right there here, you always tend to get less answers. So
Yeah,
we're very quick to be critical of ourselves in our organizations, but we have a hard time finding those positives sometimes. And
yeah.
and so I think that if you focus on it, I think you're going to find more, that there's more that you're doing that's really good. And I just noticed that's natural tendency. We as humans are always find the negative in the problems.
I love that you mentioned that, because when I was at the TTI headquarters, they have a brain lab, and you can see they hook you up with nodes all over your brain, and what they discovered is that we are much quicker to notice negatives. We
Yeah.
know our negatives way more than we know our positives, right? If you In my couples therapy practice, one of the stats from the Gottman study, long-term study on marriage, is that they uh, they look at the quote unquote disasters. So these are the people who end up getting divorced and they have bad behaviors with each other. They have a 1-to-1 ratio of positive and negative interactions. These couples do, and so they're not more negative; they're just equal amounts. But because our brains can only they focus on the negative so much,
Yeah.
that's all they'll remember, right?
Yeah.
That's why they get divorced. whereas you have the quote unquote masters, the ones who stay together in the long term, you observe their behaviors. There are 5-to-1 ratio, positive to negative, right?
Interesting.
And that's during conflict. When they're not in conflict, it's 20-1. And so lots of similar studies came up for workplace as well. So you see workplaces, I mean, it's a little bit more lenient, but anything that's below 3-to-1 ratio of positive to negative interaction is considered a toxic work environment.
Wow. Wow.
Yeah. Mm-hmm.
That's amazing. That is amazing. And it makes so much sense. This is what I've observed over the years is the focus on the negative. So
Yeah.
very interesting. That's an
Right.
interesting way to look at it.
And so you want to increase that positive, and that's where I love things like appreciative inquiry or positive psychology. Is you're really, I mean, you can't ignore the negatives. They need to be
Yeah.
dealt with, but they can be dealt with by increasing and focusing on what's good.
Yeah, yeah, absolutely. Well, this has been fantastic. I think this whole conversation has been helpful, at least for me, and I know it has been for our listeners as well. What final message would you like to leave with our listeners at this time?
Well, I was thinking about that throughout this, and I think the bottom line is that you have to take care of your people, but their people are individuals. So we don't want to blanket take care of people. We want to really get to know each person and prioritize them.
I love that. And listeners, you've heard me say that before. This is leadership is a people business and it's not a cookie cutter business. It does not work that way. You have to get to know your people. And I love, for example, what Lindsay brought up with the individual engagement plans. Again, you got to engage each individual. They're motivated differently. You got to know them. You can't lead people you don't know. Been a fantastic discussion, Lindsay, about this subject. How can our listeners find out more about you and your company?
Just go to my website, www.happyhires.ca. I am Canadian.
That's why I
But
couldn't
yeah,
find it on .com. Now I know.
but yeah, I have on there a diagnostic that you can take. That one's for the prioritized leader modules that I have. Actually, I'm creating a new one soon, so it's going to be my own framework. I'm calling it the E5 framework for high performing teams. Um, which I won't bore you with all the E's right now, but but if you just want to find out more, then yes, go to my website and reach out to me for sure. I'd love to have chats with people.
Absolutely. We're going to put a link to Lindsay's resources in the show notes here. And again, listeners, something in this conversation really stood out to you. I really highly recommend to reach out to Lindsay. He's going to help you understand this more. He's the expert, and that's why we bring experts on board. Is they're going to help you get through this. And again, there's assessment on the website that you can use, and that's going to help you kind of understand this topic a little bit more. And I highly recommend you go explore it and learn more about it and reach out to Lindsay as well, because I think he's brought a lot of really important stuff and and it's stuff that I've got a chance to learn a little bit through my doctoral process, and I know all this stuff is really important and it's all backed up by science. So he's got some really good ideas here, and I highly recommend you reach out to him and learn more. Lindsay, I want to thank you for coming on the show. You brought a lot of wisdom to the show, and I really appreciate it.
Thank you so much for having me.
Well, thank you. Well, that is it for today. Thank you for listening to Deep Leadership. If you like this podcast, please subscribe and share so we can continue to build a world with better bosses. Until next time, this is John Rennie saying take care and lead well.